What's going on, guys? It's Justice here and welcome to a new video. In this one, I'm going to be talking to you guys through my first impressions of the Protection Warrior in the pre-patch stage right before we go into BFA. Obviously, there's going to be lots of changes in the future, hopefully, in terms of how it's going to play as we level up, as we gear up, and as we unlock the Azerite armor and the traits that come with that. But for now, this is just my first impressions of how it feels in Legion, doing mythics, and with the pre-patch changes, the class changes, just going over some of the main changes. There's been Protection Warrior feels very, very different now compared to Legion, and that's what I'm going to discuss in this video. First off, it is really weird anyway because of the stat squish. It's hard to understand the damage that you're taking, the damage that you're dealing, and whether that's even good in comprehending it. But you can kind of use percentages instead, and looking at the trackers through damage done and healing done, and just looking at the percentages across the board, and that kind of helps. I also just want to add a quick disclaimer. I'm a fairly casual player on this game. I've been really enjoying tanking though over the past couple of months. My Protection Warrior right now is currently, I think, 233 eye level with the new stat squish. But then with the old eye level, right before the pre-patch hit, I was around 954. So that's just to give a bit of context. Yeah, I'm a bit of a casual player here. I'm not an expert at all by any means, but this is just how I feel while playing the Protection Warrior in the pre-patch stage. So I'm not going to cover like every single little bit, all the talent changes and all of that. I'm literally just going to give a really brief overview of like some of the obvious stuff that hits me as soon as I'm using it. So literally probably one of the obvious things that hits me is Ignore Pain being now on GCD, Demoralizing Shout being on GCD, and Charge being on GCD. So those are some big ones right there. Basically most things are on GCD now. It's kind of like one of the biggest controversial topic areas going across BFA. What does that do? Well, it psychologically makes you feel like it's slowing down the gameplay quite significantly because you can't do multiple things at once because it's restricted with it being or going onto the GCD. So that's one of the first things. Ignore Pain. A lot of people are saying Protection Warrior, just if Ignore Pain was off the GCD again, Protection Warrior would be in a fantastic place. That's what people are saying. But still, your self-sustain wouldn't be that great because Ignore Pain still now only absorbs 50%. But you would probably maybe see yourself using it a little bit more. But it's not. It's on GCD. It's something that they're definitely not going back on because there's been uproar of loads of different people talking about it and they're not going back on it. What does this make? What does this force us to do? It forces us to make a lot more decisions now within our encounters. And yeah, it feels really odd when using it, and to be honest, you're going to be using it a lot less because you're going to be making decisions on, do I want to absorb this 40 rage cost to get a little bit of damage absorption in this particular fight or not? Do you want to be using shield block still on CD pretty much, or especially holding on to it for those times when you know you're going to be taking a lot more physical damage, because again, that's on a longer CD now, so you've got to be a little bit more wary of that, but that's a standard flat out 30 rage cost. So they're making things a bit more transparent, a bit more rigid, you could say, actually, with the rage costs of your abilities, but it allows you then to calculate more in terms of when you're going to use these abilities, and they're forcing us to make more decisions as tanks within, or as a Protection Warrior. They're forcing us to make a lot more decisions on, do we want to absorb damage right now, or do we want to deal damage to retain threat? So that's there now in play. I'm going to compare that briefly to how it was. Now, with Legion, it was really speedy, fast gameplay, but we were at the top tier, sort of like towards the end of the expansion, so it's going to be at its fastest, depending on what gear you've got. But yeah, it played faster, rage generation seemed to be faster, and we'd be able to use Ignore Pain whilst using other things, and essentially how I used to play. Again, I was just coming from a group finder perspective, sort of tanking towards the end. Whenever I saw it over 50 rage, pretty much, if I saw it more, that's fine, and I'll get more absorption, but roughly, whenever it was over 50 rage, that was worth it for me to use Ignore Pain. And at times, what was really what rewarded more skill tanks, I would say, is actually preparing for attacks by absorbing and stacking up your Ignore Pain above your maximum health. So whilst you've got active mitigators up like shield block or CDs, tanking damage, so you're like mitigating that damage and preventing it, whilst that's happening, at the same time, you could be then stacking up Ignore Pain for a big attack that's about to come, and your HP wouldn't even go down. So for some big attacks coming in, you could stack up Ignore Pain, use that as almost a big CD in its own right, the way you used it, and that was really rewarding to skill tanks when you knew an attack was coming up. You don't really have that anymore, and you can't use Ignore Pain in that way effectively. It's definitely lost its place in terms of a huge damage absorption ability. It's definitely leaning now towards just a consistent sort of damage smoother over time, and you're not going to be able to stack it up as much. With that being said, on the healing done meters, you're gonna see As a protection warrior, you're going to be a lot lower down now than what you used to be. And also you're going to be a lot more reliant on healers in general. And I think that's across the board, depending on how your self-sustain is as a tank. Obviously, Blood DK is still going to be way up there. But overall, you've got a higher reliance on healers now. I'm going to briefly touch on talents and how it's forcing us now to not use Devastator as a talent, just because it kind of doesn't really make much sense with there being better talents in the game. So we've got Bolster, which it reduces Last Stand's cooldown by 60 seconds. So you can use Last Stand now every single minute. So it almost feels like the old Demoralizing Shout in terms of like the speed at which it comes off CD. The new Demoralizing Shout, by the way, has a fantastic CD now and just comes off a lot more. So what you'll find now is a Protection Warrior in BFA Pre-patch stage, we're using our CDs, and even in BFA, we're using our CDs a lot more now because they're coming off CD quicker. So that does change up the gameplay quite significantly, and honestly, it's actually quite fun using more of these CDs more frequently. It is actually quite fun, because what I did find is I was only using the CDs when I knew I was about to pull a huge pack. I would use Last Stand, but now you're using it a lot more frequently because of the effect of that Bolster. It additionally causes you to block all melee attacks for the duration of that time, which is pretty amazing. So that's for like 15 seconds. And that's really, really nice. And you get that every single minute. I think that's pretty good. So that's definitely a plus side of the Protection Warrior right now. And it shouldn't be disregarded, because it's a fantastic feature now within Protection Warrior tanking. And so that then allows you to enjoy the aspect of upskilling your CD management skills. And I'm experimenting with some weak auras right now, or tell me when auras that I'm using, set up in a similar way to Method's Go, because he's got some fantastic tanking videos, so that's helped me out a lot. And yeah, so I'm getting enjoyment from playing Protection Warrior at the moment through managing my CDs and upskilling myself in that way and using them more often. So yeah, it's pretty cool in that way. More about talents and how it's changing our gameplay. You've got a good combination now of Booming Voice combined with Anger Management. Booming Voice is a tier 90 talent, Anger Management is a tier 100 talent. You combine those two together and it's just fantastic, because Booming Voice means Demoralizing Shout now generates 40 rage, which we did have in Legion to a point. We had something that was generating, allowed us to generate rage with Demoralizing Shout, but this allows us to generate 40 rage, and it increases the damage you deal to the affected target. So you'll see like a debuff go on the targets around you, and you can combine that with even Battle Cry, for example, to even deal way more damage within a big pack or a big pull. It's a really nice combo to do, and you'll see your damage going up quite significantly within the damage done meters. But you combine that with Anger Management, and every 10 rage you spend reduces the remaining CD on Avatar, Last Stand, Shield War, and Demoralizing Shout, so like your big cooldowns. So you combine those two together, and Demoralizing Shout you're using more frequently, and you're using it to generate rage, so it's really nice. The downside from picking this talent, Booming Voice, which to be honest I would say is definitely needed. Like, I've enjoyed the gameplay a lot more with Booming Voice compared to Devastator. So you'd have to choose Devastator within this line, or Vengeance, of course. But essentially, what it's making you do, it's making you not choose Devastator, which was like a go-to talent choice in Legion, which meant we didn't have to use the Devastator ability at all, and instead it transferred it into auto attacks, dealing physical damage and having a chance to reset the remaining CD on Shield Slam like automatically. We don't have that anymore. You have to use it manually and use it as a filler ability. So that is kind of annoying, and that'd still take me a long time. Not a long time, but that'd still take me quite a bit of time to get used to actually using Devastator within the rotation. So essentially, you're going to be getting less Shield Slam procs now, which means less rage generation. So that's how it's going to feel, and that's the big downside of having the fun side of combining Booming Voice, Anger Management together, and having that Demoralizing Shout on a much shorter CD and just using it consistently every like almost 30 seconds. I mean, combine that even with the legendary Thunder God's Vigor, where each enemy you hit with Thunderclap reduces the remaining CD on Demoralizing Shout by 3 seconds. Just imagine having a pack of even just like freaking 5 enemies. That's going to reduce it by 15 seconds each time you Thunderclap. Which has a cooldown of only like 4.8 seconds, so you're going to be just spamming Demoralizing Shout within big pulls within dungeons at the moment whilst you've got that legendary. So that's fun to do. Go and do it. It's really fun right now in Mythic Pluses in that aspect of things. Just Demoralizing Shout's crazy, and you get a free 1000 Awakening Essence right now, so go and have a bit of fun, go and unlock the Thunder God's Vigor if you haven't got it already. But yeah, we're going to lose that, of course we're going to lose that, but overall, you know, Demoralizing Shout's on a shorter CD. Overall, our major CDs are shorter, our defensives, we're going to be able to use them more often, and that does add to the fun side of the gameplay. So you've got that to rotate from us losing Ignore Pain and everything. Whether it balances out, a lot of people would argue it doesn't. We'll just have to see how it pans out with Azerite Armor and the traits that those bring to the gameplay. And I don't know anything about the Azerite traits as of yet, so I'm just going to basically be seeing what the experience is like as I play it, really. Oh yeah, you also do get a new talent if you want to use it for a laugh called Dragon Roar. It's not really worth taking over Unstoppable Force in terms of the damage that you're going to deal and everything, but maybe if you want to add another CC into the midst of your group setup that you're doing with your mates, or it's probably only worth it maybe in certain dungeons where you want to add another CC in there and reduce the movement speed of the ads that you're having to deal with. But it's going to be very niche on whether you need to use that, and it'll be interesting to see if we do end up picking that as a talent choice in certain dungeons in BFA. Overall, I'm not saying it's a huge negative thing. Like, I'm still enjoying Protection Warrior, and it just changes. It's just a change, that's all, and it's a change you just got to get used to if you want to carry on playing it or not. It's quite consistent across most tanks. But that's not saying it's going to be like this throughout the entire BFA. Like, we're at the beginning here, beginning stages again now. When BFA launches, we're going to be getting new gear, new armor, new layouts, and that's going to change the gameplay again, the way it feels. This is my first experience of being at the end of an expansion and right before a new one, where everything happens like stat squishes and things, and it's a weird feeling. I personally am struggling to get my head around it all, but this video has just been about how it feels to tank right now in the pre-patch, and that's probably going to change as we level and gear up through BFA anyway. But yeah, from my perspective, I think this gave a lot more decision-making opportunities as a tank. You're passively stronger now through the combination of both Vanguard increasing your armor and your critical block mastery. So it feels like you definitely can mitigate still a decent amount of damage as a tank. Like, your mitigation's very, very high up there, especially with Last Stand now being on reduced cooldown. You combine that with Bolster, and you reduce all incoming physical damage for 15 seconds at a time every time you use that. And, you know, overall, you deal really decent AoE damage, especially combining Demoralizing Shout with Battle Cry, with Revengers. So yeah, it feels good in that way. But with that being said, yeah, you're mitigating all that damage and your armor's increased passively and everything. However, you can't heal yourself, and your self-sustain is non-existent, and therefore you have a higher reliance on healers now within this pre-patch stage. And I do just want to touch on as well, I haven't touched on these because I thought they were pretty obvious. The warriors are still, their utility is fantastic still in terms of their movement and mobility. You've got Charge, still Heroic Leap. Yes, charges on GCD, but it doesn't impact a huge amount. You can still use it quite effectively and still taunt as you charge in and things like that as you hit the targets. So yeah, overall, utility-wise, Protection Warrior is still up there, and I do just love the fact of just jumping around and charging. Across the board, tanks have been nerfed in terms of the magic damage that they can take. And that is definitely a decision high up that's been made within Blizzard to put that across the board, across all tanks. But Protection Warrior still has that spell reflect. Yes, it's been nerfed quite significantly. I think it used to absorb 50%, now it just absorbs 20% of magical damage, and it lasts 5 seconds or until a spell is reflected, and that's on a 25-second cooldown. But still really nice, and you can combine that with a little bit of Ignore Pain absorption as well. So in terms of magic damage prevention, magic damage absorption is not too bad compared to some other tanks out there. But literally, it just comes down to the fact that Protection Warriors now, you just don't really have any self-sustain at all or as much, and so you've got a heavy reliance on healers now in your groups, which could be tougher when you're doing pugs through the group finder and everything. It could be tougher because then you're really reliant on the RNG of getting a good healer or not. Less so if you're within a group of mates and you've got a guaranteed healer in there who you know, etc. But I think as a warrior, we've always been kind of used to not having high self-sustain. It's just that it's been reduced a little bit more now due to the nerf with Ignore Pain. But you can't have everything. They've just got to balance it out, I guess, and that's what they've chosen with Protection Warrior, that our self-sustain is just not going to be there. With that being said, that is kind of making me want to try out some other tanks as well, though, within this pre-patch stage before BFA's launch. So currently I'm leveling up a Paladin right now. And the reason why I want to try out the Paladin is because it's got some self-sustain, so I can feel what that's like, and it's kind of all rounded across the other areas. So it won't feel like a huge step away from the Warrior, especially considering it's a shield and sword tank as well. The authenticity of having a shield as a tank is just something about that theme that I connect to when I'm playing World of Warcraft, and having fun on the character is just as important to me as the damage numbers or mitigation numbers and stats of a tank, you know, versus others. So, you know, that's just as heavily weighted. So yeah, I do enjoy the theme, the authenticity, and what Warrior brings to the gameplay overall still. I went and got all the Mage Tower appearances for the Warrior, and it feels good to play in terms of the theme, the lore behind it, and all of that good stuff. And especially with the Orcs now standing up, and on top of that, we're going to be getting a new Orc race in BFA. I may still end up going for that and swaying towards that for BFA, but whilst it's pre-patch stage, I do want to check out some of the tanks and level them up and see if I like the feel of them, because I've not really got that many classes on this game yet. Like I said, I'm quite a casual player, so we'll see how that pans out. Also, now with retaining threat being a lot harder as a tank, Paladin might be a nice one to go for. I've heard it can be quite good at retaining threat levels across the ads, especially when you're running mythic dungeons, so that'll be pretty good maybe. So I just want to try that out for myself. But yeah, thank you very much guys for taking your time out to watch today's video. Give it a like if you enjoyed it, dislike if you didn't, and make sure to subscribe for future content. I'll see you guys in the next one.